Hello there, welcome back to Gaurav Tutorials. This is Gaurav, and in this video we will be talking about plant growth and development. So basically what we are going to do is we are going to get an introductory idea about what is a growth and what is a development in case of the plant. So the growth in case of the plant begins right after the cell divides. Okay, so as soon as the cell divides, what does it do? It forms cells that are smaller in size. Okay, now once these cells are formed, what do we find? We find these cells undergo elongation and causes and during the course of this elongation of the cell, I find there is an increase in the protoplasm. Okay, there is an addition of the protoplasm in a cell. There is an increase in the size of the cell. This event whereby the cell actually increases its size is referred to as growth in case of the plant, right? So whenever a cell divides, it forms new cells which are smaller in size, smaller in dimension. These cells will undergo elongation phase and become bigger in size, and that can be referred to as growth. So now comes the question, what is development? What is development? For development to be understood, you see the cells that are formed here, they would undergo elongation. What now these cells will do is they will become specialized in form and in function, right? They would become specialized in form and function. They will change their form and their function and become specialized. So these specialized cells will come up together and will give rise to tissues. Similarly, these tissues can come up together and can form organs. So basically, development is when the cell changes its form and function to become a specialized cell, tissues, or organ. That's what development is. All right. So you might come across a question that when does this process of development starts? It starts right when there is fusion of the gametes. There is fusion of gametes. Whenever the male and the female gametophyte will fuse together, whenever the pollen grain and the ova from the plant would come together, they would give rise to a cell called as zygote. This zygote will then develop into something called as seeds. The seed, when provided with certain conditions, suitable conditions in fact, will germinate and form sapling. They'll form sapling. The saplings will grow into a mature plant. It will grow into a mature plant. The mature plants will then form respective gametes. If it is a unisexual plant, it will form male gamete, and if it is a it'll be a female plant, it will form the female gametes. All right. And when this happens, the plants would also age. The event here would be called as senescence. Senescence. All right. The plant, when it gets old enough, will die. All right. So all these events, right from the formation of the zygote to the death of the plant, will be a part of development. Right. It will be a part of development. Now coming back to growth. I need you to understand, boys and girls, that growth for plant or any living organism, growth happens to be the characteristic feature. Right. It happens to be the characteristic. One of the few characteristic of living organism is growth. Right. One of the few features or characteristic of living organism is growth. Any living organism is said to undergo growth. Now, growth is a product of metabolism. Growth is a product of metabolism. Now, I would want you to understand what is metabolism. See, I'm speaking, you are listening to me, and maybe you are doing some other task as well. So for doing that work, I mean, biologically, if you are doing any work, you would need a lot of energy, and for that there are a lot of reactions that those reactions, I would either consume this energy or they would either produce the energy. So technically, metabolism is sum of all the biochemical reaction, sum of all the biochemical reactions in the body. All the biochemical reactions in the body. All right. So there are two types of this metabolic reactions. Something called as anabolism and something called as catabolism. There is something called as anabolism, and then there is something called as catabolism. Now, universally, it has been observed that anabolism is a constructive process, and since it is a constructive process, here energy is required. Energy is required. During the process of anabolism or during the anabolic reactions, we will find that the simple substances will be converted into complex ones, right? And for a catabolic reaction, it is considered as a degradatory reaction. Okay, it is a degradatory reaction, and during this, energy is released. Excuse me. Energy is released in the catabolism, and in the course of the catabolic reaction, you find the complex substances are converted into simpler form, right? Now, it has been observed that in an individual, when the anabolic reactions exceeds the catabolic reaction, whenever the anabolic reaction exceeds the catabolic reaction, it would result into growth. It will result into growth, as there are more biomolecules synthesized than they are degraded in an individual. I say that the organism grows. Similarly, if you reverse the situation, that means in organisms whereby the catabolic reactions are exceeding the anabolic ones, that means the constructive processes are less, but the degradatory processes are more. I would say the process of aging is undergoing. A person is aging when the amount of catabolic reactions exceeds the amount of anabolic reactions, right? So there we understood what is metabolism and how can it help in growth as well as in the aging. Now, in case of the plants, the growth is restricted to the tips. Growth is restricted to the tips. Not all the plants or all the part of the plants have the ability to grow. It is restricted to shoot and the root tips. It is restricted to the shoot and the root tips. And why do I say that the growth is restricted only to the shoot and the root tip? It's because they contain, both of these region contains a specialized group of cells called as meristem, right? They contains a specialized group of cells called as meristem. So plant in grow, the growth in case of the plant is restricted to the meristematic cells. Okay. Now, growth for plant, it is quantitative, right? It is quantitative, and since it is quantitative, it can be measured in relation to time. It can be measured in relation to time, right? Now, see, when the plant starts to grow, the size of the plant is very small, the number of the leaves in the plant is less, but as it grows, you can actually measure the length of the plant. Along with that, if the plant has less number of leaves, you can also count it, right? You can actually count the number of the leaves in the plant as well. Now, how do you define growth? How do you define growth? If you were to define growth, what can be the definition for the growth? What can be the absolute definition for the growth? So growth in terms of definition can be written as, it is a permanent irreversible growth. Just a minute. Yeah, it is permanent irreversible increase in dry weight, in the size of the cell of plant or volume. I would actually volume of cell, organ and organism, right? Now I would actually need you to highlight these two terms, these two words, permanent and irreversible. Once the growth has taken place, Once the size of the cell is increased, it would not lessen unless there are some physiological deformities with the cell. It's an irreversible process. That means the growth cannot turn into degrowth. Once the size of the plant has increased, naturally you cannot decrease that size. Once a plant has, as I mean, you cannot, I mean, except for the fact that if you're talking about you'll cut the plant, in that case it's a different matter. But if the plant has grown to be a 60 feet tall plant, you cannot restrict that 60 feet to 30 feet. You cannot confine that growth now. You cannot restrict that growth. You cannot bring back you cannot reverse it, in fact, right? Now, growth in case of the living organism is supposedly, it's intrinsic. The growth is intrinsic in case of the living organism, since this comes from the fact that there is increase in the protoplasm. There is increase in the protoplasm, right? The growth of the plant is irreversible, and it is intrinsic. It's for the plant as well as for the animals. The growth here is intrinsic, which means it happens from within. As the cells accumulate, they store the protoplasm in them. The protoplasm in the cell increases due to increased metabolic activities, right? This happens due to increased metabolic activities. Here again, when I'm saying metabolic activities, I am actually talking about anabolic processes. Okay, this is due to increased metabolic activity. For plants, the growth can be of two types. Okay, for plants, the growth can be of two types. One of the growth here is a vegetative growth. I'll choose some different color. What color? Let's go with this one. So plant can have two types of growth. There will be vegetative growth, and then there will be reproductive growth. There are two types of growth in case of the plant. There is a vegetative growth, and then there is a reproductive growth in case of the plant. So what do we actually mean when we say vegetative growth? So the growth that takes place between the emergence of seedling and flower initiation. Okay, flower initiation. The growth that takes place between emergence of seedling, okay, till the flower initiation takes place in the plant is called as a vegetative growth. And this growth will take place in the vegetative parts of the plant. Such a growth will take place in the vegetative parts of the plant, right? Moving to the reproductive growth, this growth includes initiation of the flowering, right? Initiation of flowering, development of the sex organs, post that there will be fertilization, and lastly seed formation. So all of these events will be a part of reproductive growth for the plant, right? So just let's have a brief recall of whatever we have done in this class, in this video. So first we talked about what is a growth, and then we discussed about what is development. Growth happens when there is an increase in the size of the cell, whereas development is when the newly formed cells, once they have undergone elongation, would take up fixed form and shape to become a specialized group of cells in the form of tissue or organ, right? Then we also talked about the fact that the growth is a characteristic feature of the organism. Growth happens when there is metabolic activities, more amount of metabolic activities taking place in an organism, right? We also talked about the fact that the growth is an irreversible permanent increase in the size of the cell or its volume or its dry weight. Then we talked about the fact that there are two types of growth, the vegetative growth and the reproductive growth. I hope you would have understood what was trying to be conveyed in this video. Similarly, I would also want you to, if at all you would have understood the video, I would want you to like the video and share it with your friends as well. And if at all you find the channel to be useful to you, you can also subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video. Till then, take a very good care of yourself. And in the next video, we'll be talking about the indeterminate growth of the plant.